It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means. Yes, sirree. It is time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Woohoo! And welcome to the big show. Thank you, band. Thank you, fake audience. I love you guys in my little blue box there. The ever reliable fake audience. So, last week, for those of you who were here, we had a meltdown with our email, what do they call them? Email service provider, our ESP, not to be confused with like ESP. And very few of the emails actually got to your inboxes. So I didn't want to do this show for like nobody. So I decided to wing it, and we did actually what turned out to be a pretty cool show, which I just saw in the chat room. Catherine was saying that the part of last week's show didn't end up making it onto Ustream, so we will check into that this afternoon and see what is going on with that. So last week's show was supposed to be about Taxi member Dean Crapane's amazingly good book, which is called Demystifying the Cue by Taxi member Dean Crapane. I gotta say, I've known Dean for, 10 years maybe, like a decade. And he is one of the most honorable, nicest, just warm, wonderful guy. Just, you know what? When you think of Dean Crapane and you visualize his face, you think of integrity. I was doing a film and TV thing in Nashville in a ballroom, and I invited Dean to get up and speak. And he told an amazing story that lasted, I don't know, like maybe 20 minutes, and had the audience completely in the palm of his hand. He is an amazing public speaker that I would never want to follow on a stage. And he's been remarkably successful. Why is he so successful? Because number one, he's talented. He's multi-instrumental. And he's a really hard-working guy. He's just super focused. And he latched onto the film and TV music thing and just decided to make a living out of it and do it as a business. And he's done really, really, really well. I had Sophia print me out this list. I would imagine, and hopefully Dean will show up today. I hope he shows up for the show. But there he is. Dean's in the house. Hey, Dean, how are you? What a lovely guy he is. You are. Anyway, as I said in my email today, I would imagine by now he's had thousands of placements on dozens of shows. Just some of them that we found on his website are Parenthood on NBC, Duck Dynasty on A&E. I know he gets a ton of cues on Duck Dynasty. Smash on NBC, Chris Rock's Good Hair on HBO, The Today Show on NBC, The Hills on MTV, The Oprah Winfrey Show, which was a Harpo production, Vampire Diaries on the CW, The Dr. Oz Show on Sony Pictures Television, CBS This Morning on CBS, Best Inc. on Oxygen, Switched at Birth on ABC Family, Friends with Benefits on NBC, American Guns on Discovery Channel, Bad Girls Club on Oxygen, Say Yes to the Dress on TLC, Monster Man on Sci-Fi, My Big Redneck Vacation on CMT. That's what I want, a redneck vacation. There's a cue. The Real L Word on Showtime, Mega Factories on National Geographic. I happen to love that show. I also love Mega Movers. Culture Shock on Travel Channel, Auction Kings on Discovery, The Biggest Loser on NBC, Auction Hunters on Spike, Reef Wranglers on the Weather Channel, BBC News on BBC, obviously, and a host of others. So congratulations, Dino. I'm personally very proud of you. I know that you have many, many friends who are taxi members that know you from the road rally and the forums and from the chat room here. And I think we're all very, very, very proud of you. And I wanted to say, not only has he had tons of placements, But I remember it was probably, I don't know, a few years ago now, Dean also got a cut, which ended up being on Stephanie Heinzman's CD on Universal, that made it into the top 10 on the, where, I can't read my own thing, my own notes here, top 10 on the Billboard Euro top 10. Okay? So, and if memory serves correctly, I think that cut came through a Taxi listing. Um, Dean says, "That's thanks. It's all because of Taxi." And see, this is what makes Dean such a great guy. He's always kept in touch, always let us know when he's getting placements, post stuff on the forum. He's a real giver, and I've always appreciated that. Just an incredibly good guy. So, congratulations, Dean, on all your success. And I want to let you guys watching the show know that Dean will, in fact, be our recipient of the John Brahaney Songwriting Award this year at the Taxi Road Rally, November 6th through the 9th in Los Angeles. Register now, register early. Most importantly, get your hotel rooms. There's a link. If you go to our homepage, in the middle of the page, there are three big blue buttons. And the middle one says something like Taxi's Free Convention or Taxi Road Rally. Click that big button, go to the Taxi Rally page. Keep watching that page because we'll keep updating it as we finalize speakers and panels and all that good stuff. But what was I talking about? The road rally. Oh, the hotel rooms. Last year, when we were probably, I don't know, 2 weeks out from the rally, we filled up our block. They give us probably like 80 to 90% of all the rooms in the hotel are dedicated to Taxi members for a substantial discount. I mean, it's like, I think you guys pay $125 a night for a really nice hotel room with heavenly beds, heavenly showers, and a staff of great people at the hotel that take great care of our members. Reserve your hotel rooms early because we got so many calls from people last year that had to go to overflow hotels, and then literally up to the last minute as some people were canceling, other people were finding out they did in fact have a room at the Rally Hotel, but then they couldn't drop their reservation at the other hotel without paying some sort of, like one night thing. So book your rooms early. I can't stress that enough. And the link to book your rooms is on that rally page that you can get to from the big blue button in the center of taxi.com. Okay. All right. So without any further ado, let's talk about Dean's book. In the old days, we used to simply run listings for music libraries that asked for instrumentals. Music supervisors would call and just say, do you have an Asian instrumental track? But lately, over the last 6 months to a year, all of a sudden everybody is using the word cue. And cues were typically associated with production music libraries that back in the day didn't take music from people like you. They hired guys who composed cues. They would hire a studio band of A-list players. They would go into a top-notch studio and they'd spend a month or two cutting a huge batch of cues. And they were called cues, and the word cue was kind of associated with canned music. And then the word cue kind of disappeared, certainly as far as, I would say the average musician on the street didn't know the difference between a cue and a song. Today, they specifically talk to us about cues. Now, a cue can be a song, but more often than not, they're talking about an instrumental cue. And the difference between an instrumental track or an instrumental period and a cue is that typically a cue has little to no intro. It gets right into the meat of the instrumental piece. Usually that meat is an A section, and the A section is probably more akin to what a chorus would be in a song. It's got a central melodic motif. It's repetitious, almost to the point of being sickening. You keep it interesting by adding layers. Maybe it starts out a little light with a very basic band, and then you add other instruments as you go, every 4 bars or every 8 bars, to keep adding interest to the cue, and you build it up, and then maybe you break it down, then build it back up again. And one of the more important things that you will find in cues versus just instrumentals is that they typically have a stinger or buttoned ending on the end, and that makes it good for the editors who can then end on that stinger or button and let the ring out go right up to the edit point of the next scene and probably the beginning of the next piece of music. So it is a little different animal. Let's see what else I've got here. Got that. Yeah, an instrumental might have a faded ending. Not that many people really love faded endings in the land of music supervisors or libraries anymore. I won't say that there's no chance for an instrumental piece that's got a fade, but they'd prefer to have, if they had to choose between two equally good pieces of instrumental music and one had a stinger ending and the other one had a fade, they would take the one with the stinger ending, all other things being equal. But rather than have me tell you all this stuff, I have gone through Dean's book and highlighted a bunch of stuff that I thought was interesting that you should know. There are going to be some stretches where I'm going to be reading a page or two at a time. You're going to have to put up with my reading skills. And I'm not going to give away the whole book. I'm not even necessarily giving away the best stuff because the book is so loaded with the best stuff that you really should buy a copy. You need to have a copy of this book. And as always, we don't make a penny. If 1,000 of you run out and buy this book, Taxi doesn't make a penny. I don't make a penny. You need to have this book because it is that good. Okay. So Denali Highway says, add almost sickening to the list of Cue prerequisites. Well, you know what? If you execute it well, then it's not almost sickening. They do get repetitious, but it's your job to keep them interesting. The reason they want it to be repetitious, well, Dean explains it in the book. So I'm going to start out on page 4 where he says, let's start out by examining what a cue most likely is not. Songs. The majority of music cues used in TV are not what a songwriter or recording artist would typically refer to as a song, although some cues are in fact songs. A typical pop song has a couple verses and a chorus with possibly a bridge section. It also usually has a vocalist singing or rapping lyrics. A typical music cue will have only one mood section and no lyrics. Note that vocal songs are indeed used as cues in TV shows, but instrumentals outnumber them by at least a 10-to-1 ratio. 10-to-1. So, okay, sometimes, you get more money. Sometimes with instrumental cues, a lot of times you don't get a sync fee up front. Whereas a song that plays in a TV show, especially if it's a featured use as opposed to background or source music, yeah, you could get 500, 1,000, 1,500, couple thousand. Sometimes you get lucky and hit the jackpot and get $5,000 or $6,000. But those are harder to get. There are typically less songs in a TV show than instrumental cues. And with the burgeoning reality TV show industry, instrumental cues are used everywhere. Watch an episode of the Kardashians or the Housewives of whatever, or one of our favorites, Duck Dynasty, and I say our favorites because they use a ton of music from Taxi members. It's almost all instrumental cues, and you know what? They're really, really good. I actually have been known to stand this close to the TV set in our bedroom at night listening to the cues so that I don't wake up my wife, because if I had to crank it up loud enough so I could actually hear all the instrumentation, it would certainly wake Deborah up, and I wouldn't want to do that now, would I, honey? Okay, Dean goes on to say there are a couple of good reasons why instrumental cues far I probably already gave it away. A couple of good reasons why instrumental cues far outnumber vocal music cues. First of all, songs with vocals and lyrics can often get in the way of an actor's dialogue. Music supervisors need to be very careful where and how they use vocal songs so they don't compete for attention with the actor's dialogue, thereby ruining a scene. Secondly, most TV show scenes want to highlight one particular mood or emotion at a time. It's really important. They want to highlight one particular emotion or mood at a time. Often when a pop song moves from verse to chorus, its mood and emotion will change. So in the loosest sense of the word, a cue may indeed be a song, but it's not often like your typical pop song. Okay? There is a difference. Then he goes into compositions. Traditionally speaking, composers in the film business were thought of as the ones who wrote the score, or all the music for an entire film. John Williams, who's best known for Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Bill Conti for Rocky and Dynasty, are the guys who come to my mind when thinking of a typical film and TV composers. When writing an instrumental cue may indeed be defined as composing, it's usually not referred to as a composition in the traditional sense of the word. A cue used in a TV show tends to be at the most about 2 minutes in length. So it is, at least in this way, quite dissimilar to the stereotypical definition of a film composer's score. In addition, most movies have peaks and valleys in their instrumental movements, whereas the majority of cues maintain the same mood throughout the entire composition. Granted, many cues sound like traditional movie scores, especially the dramatic, action-packed movie trailer music cues with their booming percussion and soaring orchestras. I've heard many compositions of this type that would rival the best movie scores in both their creative value as well as their sonic professionalism. Then he talks about cues. It's a subtitle, cues. What then is a cue? A music cue is produced by an artist or music library, is most commonly defined in today's TV market as a piece of music about 2 minutes in length that highlights one particular mood or a combination of similar moods, such as tense, /action, /chase, / fear music cue, or a sad / melancholy / loss music cue. A typical cue also ends with a stinger. That means it does not fade out. Many TV show music editors like to punctuate a scene with a sting or a full band chord that hits quick with little to no sustain. Usually this chord is the root of whatever key the cue is written in, i.e. if the cue is played in the key of C major, then the stinger chord will also be a C major chord. That is so true. If the music editor wants the music to fade, he or she can fade the cue whenever they desire. Sometimes they may, just repeat a section, cut it together, make a loop out of it, and then fade it. But more often than not, Dean is absolutely right. I could not agree more with him. They want to end it on ta-da, boom. Sometimes an entire 2-minute cue is used in a TV show scene, but more often than not, only a 20, 30, or 40-second slice is used. That's another great reason to keep it one central mood or thematic melody, okay? A cue may or may not have vocals in it. Some cues will maintain movement without building or lifting the mood, but quite often, a cue will build every 4 to 8 measures to intensify whatever emotion it's conveying. This can be done through melody, rhythmic elements, and instrumental dynamics, or by adding and subtracting musical instruments. There are dozens of additional production techniques used to help accomplish this type of mood intensification, many of which we will address later. Probably going to have to buy the book to learn those. Parameters. Let me reiterate that the parameters or rules I may communicate to you about what a cue is or isn't can and will be broken. The number one rule is rules are made to be broken, okay? If the cue is cool and a music supervisor likes it and uses it in a TV show, then it's right. And if it elevates the scene without drawing attention to itself, then it's great. It should be noted too that cues can be used both as background music in a scene or as foreground music. Got it? Let's move on. Okay, so I think Dean did really, really well on describing what a cue is and what a cue is not. Then he goes into a section that I think is critically important, and it's something that so many people I know fall victim to, which is thinking that they need a ton of gear and that success somehow equates to how much gear you have. Whoops, I'm getting a call. Hello. Hi, I'm in the middle of Taxi TV. I love that when the staff calls and they go, oh, crap. Okay, this section of the book is called It's Not the Gear, It's the Ear. Yes. I think Recording Magazine's blog author knows that when we talk about just needing some better software, we're often fooling ourselves. We're taking our eyes off the ball and blowing our chance to get better at our craft. I think, too, what he's getting at is it's not the gear that makes something great. What makes a recording great is a well-written song, the perfect arrangement, a stellar performance, and a killer vibe. You hear all those words in Taxi listings. Those are the things that will make our music jump out of the speakers and dance. I don't think the author is implying that it's only Paul McCartney, Stevie Wonder, and the rest of the music legends who create great music. I'd have to disagree with him if that was his point. Instead, what the author is suggesting to us is that these music masters got it right. Okay? They wrote great songs, played their instruments with passion, and sang their lyrics with a soulful delivery before they ever stepped in the studio. The studio for them was simply a way to capture greatness and document it for others to appreciate. The main thing, subtitle. It's easy for us to lose sight of this truth. Mozart, Beethoven, Frank Sinatra, and the Beatles did not have digital recording studios and sweet-sounding software in their heydays. What they had was the perseverance to develop their talents, their songs, and their performances to the highest levels, and then, and only then, put the final ink to paper or music to tape. All right? We now have in our homes and at our fingertips studio gear equivalent to what used to cost millions of dollars. But let us not forget the main thing. Let's remember to always keep in mind the things that will truly touch the hearts and minds of our audience, things like a great song or cue, a perfect arrangement, and a passionate performance. May we, as artists and technicians, always be vigilant in our remembrance of this. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. All right. Okay, looking for my next dog-eared page. How we doing on time? 4:22. Man, I'm going to have to read faster or read less sections. We got a lot of ground to cover. Okay, so Dean talks about people constantly trying to make things better. And he endorses the concept of raising the bar. Make it better. Make it the best it can be. But he also talks about people that spend too much time making things perfect, and we've talked about that before on this show. The subtitle for this section on page 12 is Too Perfectionist. Of course, having said all that stuff about, raising the bar, making things better, it should also be stated that we need to be aware of the possibility of being too perfectionist. In its extreme, perfectionism can lead to procrastination, which in turn can lead to paralysis. I think I just wrote something about that recently, like yesterday. In other words, we let our perfectionism take us over. If we let our perfectionism take us over, we will never get anything done because of the simple fact that nothing we ever produce will be absolutely perfect. So yeah, would you rather have, 20 things that feel like they're A minus, but have a market for them and can generate income and millions of people will hear and appreciate? Or is it better to have 2 things that are A++ and are perfect? Perfectionism, look, I want everything in Taxi to be perfect, but at some point you just have to get it out there. And because the cue industry, the music library industry, the music for film and TV industry is often referred to as a penny business, meaning that sometimes you make pennies on some cues, sometimes you make dollars, sometimes you make tens or hundreds or thousands of dollars over time with a particular cue. It's all about quantity, but don't sacrifice quality, but you have to understand and respect the balance of the two. I love the name of this next chapter. It's called Don't Funk with the Feel, and that was funk, F-U-N-K. Don't funk with the feel. The subtitle of this section is Background Music for TV. One of the main things I often hear new composers and producers doing wrong in their otherwise good productions is drastically shifting the mood or tempo in their songs. I've heard some truly great productions grooving pleasantly along in 4/4 teen pop rock feel when suddenly, without warning, the track abruptly shifts gears and turns into some kind of weird Caribbean bossa nova feel. This dramatic change-up is so shocking to my sensibilities, I've actually had the physical reaction of ripping off my headphones in utter befuddlement. That was hard to say, utter befuddlement. The best advice I can give to songwriters and producers who indulge in this kind of artistic license when creating background music for film and TV is stop it. Unless you have been hired to score and orchestrate an entire movie and are working side by side with the film's director, don't alter the vibe or the time signature. Don't mess with the groove and don't funk with the feel. When a music supervisor hears a piece of music, he or she needs to know immediately what the mood is. It needs to be utterly obvious. That mood needs to sustain or build throughout the entire track. If a music supervisor needs to change the mood in a scene, they will simply grab an additional piece of music with the different desired mood and insert it precisely at the point in the scene where they want that emotional change. Trust me on this. Changing moods or the vibe or the feel of your track will do nothing except make you look like an amateur to the very people you want to look like a professional to. Good advice, Dean. And now Dean is going on to one of my very favorite guilty pleasures and favorite subjects, Bee Gees. But Dean, it's so cool to have my song change moods. Lots of hits from big-time artists have done this. Why can't I? Yeah, many hit songs throughout the history of radio have changed tempos and feels. See Bee Gees' Nights on Broadway, Godspell's Day by Day, Adele's Rumor Has It, or the Doobies' Jesus Is Just All Right. The list goes on and on. These songs with their mood changes are cool for what they are, which is radio hits. Different animal. But they do not work as well. They do not work well as background mood tracks in current film and TV shows. Notice that he uses the word current. You know, if we were talking about Footloose, songs from that era might work. What was the Tom Cruise movie with the Top Gun? You know, those Kenny Loggins songs or whatever other 80s songs made it into that movie. Yeah, you know, you could get away with that. That was of the day, of the moment. It was typical back then, but not anymore. Currently, people want a single mood. Okay? If a music supervisor and director desires those exact mood changes, they'll probably just license a particular hit song from the original artist. And that specific hit song will often be used as foreground music as opposed to becoming a background mood enhancer. Remember, more often than not, your music is there to enhance the mood or the emotion of the scene. It's to elevate that, to underline it, to make the viewer and listeners feel and absorb that mood. Stick with the mood. Whatever emotion you're trying to convey in your song, stay there. Build that vibe and feel. Give it motion and interest. Give it motion and interest. Write that down. Give it motion and interest, but stick with the mood you started with. You know what? If you bought this book and that was the only thing you learned from this book, which is obviously not going to be the case, that would be worth the price of what you just paid for. You don't want to be the guy who says, just as his dream date is about to lay her first kiss on him, hey, how about that grand slam in the Sox game last night? Buzzkill. Stick with the mood. Go with the flow. Don't rock the boat or rattle the cage, at least not in your film and TV cues. All right. Mojo Bone says Danger Zone. Yep, definitely a reference to the Tom Cruise movie Top Gun. All right. Let's see. Boy, I've got a lot of other dog-eared pages. So I'm going to start shortening the amount of stuff I'm reading. How are we doing so far? Is this all making sense? You guys digging it? I sure hope so. Also, welcome. I see some new faces in the chat room. So welcome, you guys. I'm glad that you could join us live. The show, as good as it is, watching it after the fact in the archive, there's something about being in the chat room and being able to ask questions. So I think at the end of the show, maybe we should ask some questions and let Dino answer them. So actually, I'm going to take a sip of Rockstar Recovery and wet my whistle. Okay, now he's talking about accuracy. When submitting cues to music libraries or music supervisors, we must take great care in trying to be as accurate with our mood identifiers as possible. If we've labeled a cue as funny, mischievous, and quirky when it's actually quite tense and apprehensive just because we think somebody could use it in a dark comedy, we may be shooting ourselves in the proverbial foot. If a music supervisor listens to that track because they're looking for something quirky and mischievous and they hear something tense and apprehensive, they might think WTF. We all know what that stands for. Be accurate when describing your cues. Don't waste their time and run the risk of alienating yourself from the music library or from the supervisor. Helpful tips. When I'm going into the studio to produce a tension track, for example, it's helpful for me to take a long list of tension moods and read them over and over again as I'm writing and recording. The list might look like this: tense, fearful, aggressive, suspenseful, anxious, apprehensive, danger, dark, chase. That list will help me more clearly imagine what those moods might sound like so I can more sharply define my track's mood as I go. My list when I go into the studio to record a dramedy cue might look like this: sneaky, quirky, playful, funny, fun, mischief, comedic. All right. I'm not going to redo the rest of that chapter because I am not going to give away the whole book. I promise, Dean. The next chapter I'm going to read from is called Blackberry Cobbler, Templates. And you guys know how much I love templates, and Dean talks about that. If you're contemplating making your career in music production, you will need to know that sometimes there are deadlines and you must develop the ability to create and produce your music very quickly. Yeah, you can't spend a month on a single piece of music. Nope, you got to do it, as Dean says, like overnight. There have been many times where I've only had a few short hours to start, complete, and deliver a piece of music to a client. The need for speed has happened to me in the TV world, in the advertising industry, and elsewhere. One time I was asked to write, record, and deliver a potential theme song for a new TV show literally overnight. I delivered it on time but didn't get the gig. You win a few, you lose a few. But learning to produce quality music quickly will help you win a few more and lose a few less. So that makes Dean tell us about his Blackberry Cobbler, and I'll summarize where he talks about how he experimented until he finally found the right recipe for his Blackberry Cobbler. After months of experimenting, I finally settled on a very simple recipe. It calls for 1 cup of flour. All of a sudden, my stomach started growling. I'm hungry now. It calls for 1 cup of flour, 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and 1/3 of a cup of butter at room temperature. The butter at room temperature part is very important. Don't ask me why. I'm not a chemist or a physicist. It just is. You spread this concoction over your blackberry mix and bake it for precisely 25 minutes at 400 degrees. So that's his template for the Blackberry Cobbler. Then he goes on to say, when I first started recording instrumental cues for film and TV, it would take me 20 to 25 hours to complete a new cue. Now it takes me between 4 to 8 hours to write and complete a production, depending on the length and complexity of the style. So how did I go from an average of 22.5 hours down to an average of about 6 hours per production? It has a lot to do with building templates. Back when I was just beginning to learn my craft, I would spend hours upon hours listening to each individual kick drum sound in my virtual instrument library. Every snare drum sound, the hi-hat sounds, and on down the line. I would try out 15 or 20 basses just trying to find the right one. I did the same thing for organ sounds, piano sounds, string patches, guitar amps, and, well, every instrument that went into producing the cue. I'd spend hours measuring out the specific ingredients to make the tastiest recipe. And not knowing how to produce the perfect track, and not really knowing how to produce the perfect track, I had to try out a lot of different recipes to figure out what I was doing and try to get better at it. But slowly, after recording cues number 2, 3, 4, 15 through 50, I started to find out that some of the ingredients, some particular basses and certain guitar sounds, kick drums, and other musical instruments made for the tastiest cobblers, the best music every time. I began to realize that whatever style of music I was producing, be it AOR or pop or hip hop or whatever, there were specific instrument sounds that worked best for each genre. Just like some ingredients work best for a Blackberry Cobbler and others work better for a pepperoni pizza, so it is with music. So he began to build templates, and this is what I've been preaching for months, and I'm so glad that he brings that up in the book. Why reinvent the wheel? And I'm sure that Dean goes on to talk about this, but let's say that you're doing comedic cues, you're doing quirky, sneaky comedic cues. Chances are a lot of those same instruments that you used for the first one would be applicable for many others that you're going to do that are also quirky and also sneaky. And you can do sneaky 10 different ways, and you could probably use the same instruments. Now, you may not want to send all 10 of those cues to the same library if you've used many of the same instruments and it sounds like you did them all, in the same couple of days in the same studio. Some libraries would want that. I don't think many would turn up their nose at it, but why not parse it out and give 3 sneaky cues done with that musical instrument template to one library, 3 or 4 to another, and 3 or 4 to another. Then you've got 3 companies that are out there swinging the bat for you, but you have used Dean's template system to effectively and efficiently cut more songs in a shorter period of time. And as he mentioned earlier, don't be such a perfectionist that you try to make each one of them a masterpiece. Nobody is going to pay attention when you've got Chris Jennings and what's her name? Chris Jennings, right? Fighting with Kim Kardashian in the kitchen at their house. Whatever drama cue that you've used for that is going to be in the background. Maybe it comes up for a second or two. Maybe it punctuates a particular sentence or piece of dialogue. But basically, it's going to be in the background. And nobody cares about your music nearly as much as they care about the dialogue and what's happening with the actors or the reality show people. Same thing as actors, right? Okay. Got that done. I made a note in the book. Tell story of producers spending half a day on just a kick drum sound of a particular producer. I won't mention the producer's name. It's somebody that I know well, and no, it's not Rob Shirelli, but it's a good friend of mine. I adore him as a person. I highly respect his work. And one day I was with him in the studio probably 2 or 3 years ago, and he was sitting there literally for hours doing boom, 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 whack, 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 thud, 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 just going through hundreds of kick drum sounds. Hundreds. I don't believe he was getting paid by the hour. Maybe he was. But, I understand, I understood in the moment the guy's need to try and find something really creative, something new, something fresh, something stunning. He was working on a record, not a cue for a TV show. But that's the way records are made. I was in a studio many years ago, probably like 8 or 10 years ago, where they were working on a hip-hop record. It was amazing. There was a guy sitting there with a Roland drum machine doing boom, cha, boom, cha, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. Anyway, I think they did that for like 5 or 6 minutes straight by hand, and then recorded it on Pro Tools, and then hit play and played it all the way through. And the producer said to the guy playing boom, cha, can you speed it up a little bit? And so they went back to the top, and he just played a little faster. I'm sure they were going to quantize it later. And I was just laughing to myself, thinking, oh my gosh, they've got all these incredible sounds. They've got all this technology at their fingertips. And they were spending all this time. And I understood they wanted to get the right feel and they wanted to get the right sounds. But man, technology makes it easy to do that. So that's one extreme, what those couple of producers were doing. Dean gives us an example template in the book. This is an example template of a straight-ahead pop rock cue using mostly virtual instruments and a couple of real guitar tracks, which, by the way, adding real guitars on top of a track that's done with all other virtual instruments, or throwing a banjo on top of something done with virtual instruments, anytime you can add a couple of real instruments played by humans on top of a track done with a bunch of virtual instruments and computers, it's going to make it sound more real, more human. So do that. Anyway, I'm going to rattle off some of the stuff that Dean recommends, and I'm going to rattle it off so fast you won't be able to write it down, so go buy the book. But for the kick drum, remember, this is for pop rock, using mostly virtual instruments and a couple of real guitar tracks. For the kick, he used Sample Tank 2, drums acoustic / BD, E3, trim the decay back to 100. Hi-hat, he used Sample Tank 2, A4. For the snare, he used Easy Drummer, Nashville expansion kit. Use Easy Drummer Room Reverb, which I am a big fan of that, by the way. Toms, he used Easy Drummer, the Nashville expansion kit again, and using the Easy Drummer Room Reverb. Crashes, either Easy or ST2. I don't know what that is. I'm guessing Easy Drummer or ST2, no idea. Anyway, bass, Sample Tank 2, P bass, fingered, back the tone down to 4.2, go to Trilogy if necessary. Acoustic piano, Sample Tank 2, Bright Concert Piano, KW, add a touch of high-end EQ, and ST2 reverb 21% with 2.4 second decay. Percussion, if tambourine, use ST2, Sample Tank 2. Percussion, tambourine, if claps, use Sample Tank 2, drum / electronic / 800. Guitar 1, Fender Strat through Pod, maybe start with the Pod preset 2B. Guitar 2, Fender Strat, either doubling Guitar 1 with different settings or chord or fret placements to make it sound fatter probably, or record an additional new guitar part. Guitar 3, Omnisphere / vintage / Strat or other. Chorus pad, Omnisphere, human voices / pop stack, male and female, ahs or oohs, 25% Omnisphere reverb. High string pad, Sample Tank 2 / synth / pad, beyond voyage. Additional glue in quotes on the word glue, pad or El piano, electric piano, wherever can help glue the track together. Pan most drums and bass straight up at 12 o'clock. I couldn't agree more. Pan acoustic piano just off center and left at about 11 or 11:20. Pan and spread everything else out to taste. Personal recommendation on my part is if you pan stuff too far and too left, things that move a lot, they're going to distract a listener and make them go, huh, what? They're going to be chasing your pans. So try to avoid radical panning unless you need to have it for a reason. Set sound effects or effects and levels to personal taste. Mix using slight amount of limiting or compression. Underline the word slight. Master with Ozone 3, CD mastering or other settings set to taste. This is just one of an infinite amount of templates I've discovered. This particular template enables me to produce a 2-minute pop rock instrumental cue in 4 to 6 hours. Why? Because he's only really got to worry about the parts and the mood and the emotion that he's playing and the arrangement that he's doing to convey those things, rather than sitting there for an hour trying to get a bass sound or sitting there for 20 minutes trying to get a hi-hat sound. Why mess with that stuff when you've got stuff that you know already works? All right? Just scanning the chat room really quick and checking my time. Wow, 45 minutes in. All right, so the takeaways, a couple of takeaways. He puts these takeaway pages, which I think are awesome, every now and then in the book, where he numbers the key points. Takeaway 6 is study all your virtual instruments and build templates for different genres. Number 7, templates help you become faster at producing music. And why is that important? Because, as I mentioned earlier, it's about quantity and quality, okay? So the templates make it easier to do more great music faster. Just that simple. I'm not going to tell you how he records his guitar. You'll have to read the book for that. And Dean actually stresses in the book that this was not intended to be a book on recording. He talks about some recording stuff, but it's not intended to be that. Let's see. Anatomy of a Redneck track. Now, why this is important is because I know that Dean and many other Taxi members have their music weekly in Duck Dynasty. So today I'm going to write and record a Redneck Southern rock track. Why? It's for a show called Duck Dynasty on A&E, which has been using a lot of my music lately. I thought I'd jot down my process so you can compare it with yours. Maybe we can both learn something. Note, this is not the only process of working I use, but it's my process today. Man, he's got it all marked out by what time of day. So I'm just going to tell you what he did at different times rather than reading you whole pages, okay? But at 1:15, he entered the studio and he's turning on all of his stuff and opening up his DAW. Queued up a couple audio tracks, add EQ, plug in just to be ready in case inspiration strikes. Opening up some MIDI tracks, loading an old piece of music software called Sample Tank, which he talks about in that last piece that we read. He grabs his Fender Strat off its stand, running it through the pod from line 6, then into my board, then out of the board into my workstation. First order of business is to simply start playing around with Southern rock type guitar licks and hope that lightning strikes. So he's on a mission. He's going to do Southern rock. Sets up his guitar to sound like it's right for Southern rock. At 3:15, finally found a rock and guitar riff, and after laying down a kick drum, 4 on the floor at 144 BPM, I've recorded 2 tracks of the riff on different amp settings for wider frequency response so that I can pan the guitar both left and right. I've got to read as I'm going here. At 4:30, he's got the track grooving along, feels pretty tight. I wish that you could hear it. Wish that I could hear it. Now I'm going to slam down a B3 organ part as well as some crashes, and then I'll listen and evaluate what ear candy I might need. So already between, between 1:15 and 4:30, in 3 hours and 15 minutes, he's already got a substantial framework for the track laid down. He gets the B3 part, putting cymbal crashes in their proper places. He's now listening to what he has and tweaking the mix. And note that he's mixing as he goes. This is not always my MO, but I'm going for speed today. My gut reaction on the first listen is that this song could use a blues harp, a harmonica at the intro, maybe a chugging blues harp throughout to give it even more of a Southern rock redneck attitude. Well, there you go. You know, that's an example of laying a real instrument on top of tracks. So he's got real guitars and a real blues harp on top of other stuff that's done with a computer. At 5:30, now he's recording the harmonica up close on an SM58. Sounds good and dirty like a bar band harmonica. Adding the B section guitar riff, I'm ready to tweak the mix. At 6 o'clock, the cue is in the can, pending tomorrow's double check. I think I'll go make a sandwich. So there you go. He started at 1:15, and in less than 5 hours, he's got a finished track that only needs to be checked on the following day. Lastly, the track was only 1:06 in length. Had I recorded a full 2 or 3 minute track, I could have easily added a couple more hours to my recording time. On average, I can usually record a track in a style I'm familiar with in 4 to 6 hours. Some take 8 to 10. If I'm writing a vocal song, it can take weeks to find all the best lyrics. Okay, So the most important thing is not the amount of time it takes to record the song. The important thing is that it sounds really good when you're finished. This one sounded pretty greasy, just like a rowdy redneck bar band song should sound. I love greasy. Okay, looking for the next section, and going to take a swig of water before I go on to it. Is this all making sense so far? I sure hope so. I'm telling you, as I sat there reading the book last week and then over the weekend, I just kept smiling. I mean, this thing, it's a roadmap. It's a roadmap for successfully creating cues. The next chapter is called Clutter. And he's got a quote by Leonardo da Vinci, which simply says, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." Man, oh man, if I could, give you a short list of tips that I would give to virtually everybody who's ever been a taxi member, it is keep it simple, stupid. So many people, it's like just because you can put a part in doesn't mean you have to. So Dean does a whole chapter on that, and I'm skipping lots of pages, but I'm going to the section called Less is More. You've already heard me say this in the book, that less is more. Right now I'm going to say it again, less is more. We feel it in our hearts and minds when we know it to be true. If we try to cram too many activities or work into our week, or if we get too many thoughts rolling around and around in our head, life just doesn't seem to work so well. We need to simplify. We need to have some work, some play, some people time, and some quiet downtime. When we simplify and balance things, we're much less stressed, depressed, anxious, and frustrated. That's just the way that life works. The same less is more principle holds true for recording and writing music. Sometimes we need to step back and take a good look at our songs. When we do this, we will often realize that we have too much stuff in them. They're cluttered with all kinds of junk we once thought was cool. Too many notes, too many lyrics, instruments, or effects. Our songs have no balance. If, however, we clean out some stuff, take away some of the junk, if we simplify our songs and our productions, like our lives and like my garage, will become less awesome. Will become awesome showcases. Their less will become a lot more. Ask yourself, do I really need this third guitar part? Probably not. Or does the keyboard player really need to be playing 8 notes all at once? Maybe 2 notes will do. And does the verse really need to be 12 lines of lyrics? What would happen if I cut out 4 of those lines? Go ahead and question all that potential clutter. Does the drummer need to be playing a big fill throughout the last measure of every 8th bar? Should the singer be riffing over the drum fill? In our music, as in our life, it behooves us to remember that less is more or less. Words of wisdom. Can't tell you how right on the money Dino is with that. Looking for my next dog-eared section. Okay, some takeaways from chapters 26 through 32. Film and TV foreground song lyrics. Remember, foreground song lyrics should stick to painting one lyrical scene. Background or source music in film and TV need not adhere to the paint one scene only rule, as those songs are used for vibe with the lyrics barely heard. I'm not going to say I disagree with that, but it's notable that we frequently, almost always, get requests for music from libraries that ask for universal lyrics, and they'll even mention that the songs are going to be used in a jukebox in a bar scene, or background music in a swanky restaurant scene. Maybe a light jazz combo with a sultry female sequin-dressed jazz vocal. It's just bobbing my head. My daughters are always making fun of me for that. You guys make fun of me for that. In a lot of scenes, it doesn't matter, because the music is wallpaper. It's down so low in the mix, you literally have to search for it to hear it. If it's not there, you'd notice the emptiness. If it is there, you don't notice it, but the scene somehow feels fuller. And it probably contributes or underlines the mood, but the lyrics aren't important. Yet, why is it that the libraries or the supervisors will say, give me universal lyrics, meaning they want you to avoid specific names, dates, places, times, profanity. You don't want to do I kissed Susie with her blue eyes for the first time in St. Louis under that giant arch, and she called my name and said, Ralph, I love you so much. You can't use that anywhere except in a scene with a girl named Susie kissing a guy named Ralph, and she's got blue eyes and they're kissing under the arch in St. Louis. Totally unusable, right? Now, if you had a sultry jazz song that mentioned springtime, could that be used in the back of a restaurant scene where it's way down in the mix? Yes. But somebody may call that library someday, and they probably will, and ask for a sultry jazz song that's going to be in the foreground when somebody walks into a jazz club, and the music is very prominent in the mix because the dialogue hasn't started yet. And if the mention of springtime is right there, it might make it unusable because maybe they just got out of the car and it's winter. Things like that can happen. So even though most of the time the song is probably going to be mixed really low, it's probably going to be background, it's going to be more of a texture than a featured song, even though they say that the lyrics aren't as important. Someday somebody may want to use it where the lyrics are important. So you're always better off, as a rule of thumb, giving them universal lyrics that avoid specific names, dates, times, places, profanity, and brands. Okay? Number 6, try to find multiple artists. Oh, this is so important. And this confuses the hell out of our members. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this one. Try to find multiple artists within any particular genre to study for a broader scope of style. I can't tell you guys how many times I've seen complaints from our members on our forum, in emails that we get. People talk to me about it at the rally. We get phone calls from cranky members saying, I tried to send you stuff that sounded just like the reference artist. More often than not, in the taxi listings, when we are referencing artists, we're referencing a range of artists that, and we use phrases like could be heard on the same playlist as, would be loved by the fans of artists like, Christina Perry and this artist and that artist. We're starting to now add et cetera, et cetera, et cetera after we list 2 or 3 or 4 artists. The reason is we don't want the members, we're not asking the members to come up with a match for those artists. Yeah, the music supervisor, and there are exceptions, and I'll get back to that in a minute. I'm going to make a note, exceptions. They don't want sound-alikes very often. They don't want stuff that is just like Pat Benatar or just like Adele, or just like Imagine Dragons, but they may want something that sounds youthful and, indie poppy, indie rocky, youthful, buoyant, happy, fun, and it sounds contemporary and hip and cool like Imagine Dragons. So what is it? Listen to Imagine Dragons and 2 or 3 other artists that would be on the same playlist. What are the things that they have in common? Well, they probably have like a really singular melodic hook. They probably have vocals that are kind of fun and buoyant. They may have something rhythmically cool like hand claps or foot stomps. So, what are those elements that they have in common? Those are the things that get you in the ballpark. But if you've got something that is in that ballpark, but you're fooling yourself into thinking, oh no, I need to have something that sounds exactly like those, you are wrong. Now, the exception is, yes, there are times, I'm going to give you a specific example. Really good veteran music supervisors, not, some of the less experienced, like former A&R people that know all the cool bands and call themselves music supervisors, are a different breed than somebody like Maureen Crow, who is our keynote, our Lifetime Achievement Award honoree this year at the Road Rally, and our keynote interview. The woman is a true pioneer of the craft of music supervision. She is somebody, she's not the person I'm thinking of here, but she's somebody that's smart enough that when she's got a producer or director on a major motion picture that is absolutely dead set on licensing a Beatles song or a Led Zeppelin song, something really big and really expensive, and they've already blown most or all of their music budget, the music supervisor will politely mention to them on 1, 2, 3 occasions, just letting you know now, we've pretty much shot the music budget. We are not going to have $500,000 or $1 million to license that big, song that everybody on the planet knows. So you're not going to get Stairway to Heaven, or you're not going to get Freebird, unless you want to get rid of some of these other songs and replace them with material from, let's say, Taxi members, independent musicians. They can save money rather than paying, $50,000 to license a well-known song or $100,000 to license a well-known song. They might give you guys $2,500 or $4,000 to license something that's in the ballpark. So a smart veteran music supervisor will know that when it comes down to the end of the film and they are on the mix stage and it's time to, I'm trying to think of a nice, it's time to or get off the pot on that particular song, because we're mixing that scene right now and we've had the Stairway to Heaven temped in for the last 6 months, and all of a sudden now you've got to make an executive decision. You can't get any more money from the producer. You've blown your budget, you've blown through your music budget and your film's entire budget. What are you going to do? Well, a really smart music supervisor will have called Taxi and or some libraries probably several months in advance and said, do you have anything that sounds kind of like Stairway to Heaven? They won't want a sound alike. They won't want a dead ripoff, but they're going to want something that has the key musical elements that evoke the same emotional and visceral response that Stairway to Heaven has, and they are going to keep that in their back pocket until the director finally yells, "Uncle." And when the director yells, "Uncle," and says, "Okay, I understand. I don't have any money left in the budget. What else can we do?" The music supervisor says, "Well, I thought this might happen, so I hope you don't mind, but I reached out to some people that I know, and I've got 3 other songs that you should hear that I think really work well in the scene," and they play those, and lo and behold, every every now and then some unknown person who has copped the vibe really well without ripping off the melody, without ripping off any of the song's important ideas, but yet somehow cops the overall feel, the essence of the song, that person's going to land a great placement on that day. Notice that I've gone from the purple can, now moving on to the orange can. Okay. I've now done an hour. Let me see. I'm going to give you 1 or 2 more things, and then I want to read you guys off. Dean very generously includes in the back of the book a list of moods. And I'm going to read off some of the moods, because you know what? This is another one of those things. If you buy this book and all you got was the list of moods in the back of the book, and every day that you go into the studio, you're on a mission, and look at that list of moods and pick one and go in there with the intent of writing stuff for that mood. Don't wait for the muse to drop from heaven and into your lap and tickle your fancy and give you an idea for something, because chances are you're going to end up creating something maybe that, artistically you'll love it, but it may not have a lot of value from a financial point of view. assuming that you want to make money with your music, and again, doing instrumental cues or doing song cues, doing any kind of cues for film and TV, yes, there's a little bit of a factory-like vibe to it. Yes, there's a purpose to it. You could call it cookie cutter to some extent, but it doesn't make a total lack of creativity, and it certainly doesn't preclude you from doing the music you love on your own time. But this stuff is your job. It's what you're doing to make money, okay? So, where is that other thing that I underlined? All right. Smackers, greenbacks, and clams. Those of us who are pursuing music careers, even if we're just a one-person business, will all need to dole out some investment bucks from time to time. We're going to be forced to turn over a few greenbacks and chuck a few clams, as they say, whether it's $15 on replacing guitar strings or a couple grand on new orchestra sample library. We'll need to spend some moolah from time to time. It's tough. It can hurt. To maximize your risk, you want to do your best, most diligent research, and some cautious calculations so you can invest wisely and get the most bang for your buck. If you're smart, I keep saying lights flashing. That's disturbing to me. I hope we don't have a short in the ceiling. If you're smart with your decisions, good things will happen. In the end, investing in any business, and you are a business, is somewhat of a gamble. But if you're talented, work hard at your craft, investigate and learn from others who are farther along the path than you are, it'll be well worth it. It takes guts, grit, grime, and gumption to get up and go, but why not take the risk? This boat we're all sailing on will only float for so long. We might as well stop off on some exotic shores and enjoy a few exciting adventures along the way. Truer words have never been spoken. So now I'm going to rattle off the moods and then turn this over to, and hopefully Dean, yeah, he's still there, and let Dean talk to you or answer your questions. So the moods, this is just some of them that I've checked off. Actually, I've checked off a lot. Aggressive, ambient, atmospheric, ballad, bluesy, bouncy, brooding, carefree, cartoon, cautious, cheerful, childlike, confident, dangerous, dark, delicate, dramatic, dreamy, driving, edgy, eerie, electronic, elegant, emotional, energetic, epic, ethereal, ethnic, evil, fear, feel good, festive. Boy, if we're talking advertising, those two right there, feel good and festive are your target. Folksy, fun, funky, funny, futuristic, grungy, happy, haunting, heartfelt, hopeful, heroic, humorous, hypnotic, introspective, jazzy, joyful, light, majestic, meditative, melancholy, mellow, mournful, mysterious, ominous, patriotic, pensive, percussive, positive, powerful, pulsing, quirky, reflective, rhythmic, romantic, sad, scary, sentimental, silly, sinister, slapstick, soaring, soft, soothing, sophisticated, soulful, southern, spacey, sultry, suspenseful, sweeping, tender, terror, tribal, boom bada boom bada boom, triumphant, uplifting, warm, whimsical, wistful, and zany. So there you go. That was just a smattering of the moods. But you know what? Buy the book. Here's the cover. Demystifying the Cue by Dean Crepane. Try and spell that name from memory. Buy the book. Take that list and go in the studio every time. Try this for a month. Every time you go in the studio, take that list, and before you walk in the room, run your finger up and down and blindly pick one and try your hardest to write to that mood that day. If you don't like the random choice method, then look down the list and go, you know what? I think I can write really good introspective stuff. So with that, congratulations again to Dean for writing a really great book. You can buy it on Amazon. Just go to Amazon.com and in the little search box, type in Demystifying the Cue, and it will take you to the book. I'm going to go warm up my air conditioner, which, by the way, for the first half of the day was broken, and it's over 100 degrees outside, so it was mighty toasty in here today. But it's not toasty anymore, let me tell you. It's freezing cold. So, Dean, can I show the book again? Yes. And I will hold it up for a second or two longer. Demystifying the Cue by our friend Dean Crepane. So, do you guys have questions that you would like to ask Dino? You're welcome, Adriana. By the way, Adriana and I spoke on the phone the other day. She actually grew up in the same little hometown that I grew up in, Ottawa, Illinois, and we know a lot of the same places. My parents used to own a small department store in beautiful downtown Ottawa, which, by the way, is where Abraham and Lincoln and, what was his name? Lincoln Douglas, not Paul Douglas. What was the guy's name? Anyway, the first Lincoln-Douglas debate was held in the town square there. And when my parents moved out of the town and they sold the building, whoever bought the building kind of parsed it out to different businesses, and there's a coffee shop in there, and Adriana recorded her first CD in the building that my parents used to own and I worked at every Saturday of my life as a kid and through my teen years. So there you go. I'm going to go make it warmer. Dino, answer some questions. Okay, I'm no longer freezing. Will Dean speak at the road rally? Yes, Dean will. I've asked Dean to teach a class, and also Dean will speak when he's honored with the John Brahaney Award. We'll do a little 15-minute interview with him. And as I mentioned on last week's show, I'm seriously contemplating, and you guys endorsed the idea, rather than doing a typical successful member panel, we're going to bring back kind of like the all-stars and do a panel of like 5, 6 all-stars. And I think what I might do is put Dean on that panel and then at the end present him with the award and interview him personally or singularly. There you go. So ask your questions, and Dean is already answering them. I can just sit here and watch. Actually, I'm going to read some of the questions and answers so that those of you who are watching the show later in the archive know what the heck is going on rather than just watching me stare at this thing, okay? Jazz Stan. I'm trying to match questions and answers. Mary Walk asks, are music supervisors interested in cues with vocal hooks? Dean says, yeah, music soups use vocals a lot. How long did it take to write the book? Didn't answer that one. Richard Charles said, do you have a folder for every mood that Michael just listed? And Dean says, yeah, I have all the moods on paper. Dinod read the whole book on a long flight last week, enjoyed it, learned a lot. Thanks for the insight into your process. Dean says that he wrote the book slowly over a period of a year or so. Come on, guys, ask some questions that he can answer so that the people who watch the archive don't just see me sitting here like a bump on a log, which I've been known to be very frequently. Mojo Bone points out that we've got some lag here. Yeah, we do have a lag between the time when somebody types in a question and it shows up. Um, Will Dean be participating in the mentor lunch and one-on-one mentoring? We're asking him to do quite a few things, and yes, I certainly hope so. And he says yes, mentoring. I mean, man, you couldn't get a better mentor. That's one of the cool things that's happened at the Road Rally, which is coming up November 6th through the 9th, and every taxi member gets 2 free tickets. One of the cool things is over the years, a fairly large group of our members have become consummate professionals now. So they are, in fact, mentoring newer, less experienced members. And I got to say, that makes me feel pretty proud that we've been able to help people in that way. Um, I'm feeling Dean's as slow a typist as I am. I'm seeing several questions go by with no answer. So between the delay in the chat room and the speed at which he types, um, Michael Mishna just asked a question. I love the answer. Dean, do you register all of your copyrights? Um, Dean would be a great guest on the show. Well, come to the Road Rally. Dean says no, he doesn't register his copyrights, and I'm curious why you don't. We see this question a lot. Um, I know that a lot of my friends, a lot of our members who write instrumental cues don't bother registering them, and when I've asked them, they say, "Hey, it's a cue. If somebody rips off a cue, it doesn't represent like what getting, if you were ripped off for a song that became a massive hit, that would be an expensive rip off. I think people don't worry so much about getting a cue ripped off." Dean says he's not a lawyer, but I figure I can prove my copyright with a digital stamp or date on an MP3 file. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go to court over, a $500 cue, because you'd spend a lot more on lawyers, but I'd certainly understand that. Um, Mojo Bone asks a good question. Does Dean know exactly how many cues are earning him money? Yeah, I'd be curious. After doing the show that I did on the 80-20 rule, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, Dean, have you noticed, if it's like 20% of your cues that earn 80% of your income or any percentage or ratio that's close to that? Dean says Q dollars vary. ASCAP tells me maybe about 500 earning currently. Andy Gabbers wants to know how many total cues you have out there. And Dean says in answer to my question earlier, yeah, that it's probably 20% of his cues earn 80% of his income. Oh, where can we hear Dean's music? At deancrepane.com. Google him. His last name is tough to spell. I'm going to spell it for you. His brother Scott, who's also a friend of mine, spells his name a different way that's easier. Dean sticks with the traditional family spelling, which is Krippaehne. That's Dean, Krippaehne. Dean Crepane. Google his name or go to deancrepane.com. Actually, go to SoundCloud and search for Dean Crepane, and you will hear a bunch of his music well organized there. I spent a lot of time checking it out the other day. He's how many cues do you have signed to publishers? How many publishers are you signed with? He says over 1,000 cues. He's also posted some of his Duck Dynasty tracks on the Taxi Forum. And Dean says he's got his music is with about 20 different publishers, he thinks. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he says. So 20 different publishers, about 1,000 different cues, and 80% of his income comes from roughly 20% of his output. He also says probably 7 publishers have 90% of his tracks. Major Look says, if Dean's music is not registered, does he still get paid from ASCAP and BMI? It's different between being copyrighted and registered with your PRO. There's a difference. He says all of his cues are registered with ASCAP. And he spelled it right the second time. Metri Steve wants to know, he exclusive? I think he means, is he exclusive? That's a great question, Dean. If you had to guesstimate a percentage of the percentage of your tracks that are with exclusive libraries versus non-exclusive, could you do that? He says both. He's got stuff with both exclusive and non-exclusive. Thanks for that nice comment, Luger. And Dean says 70% of his stuff is with non-exclusive libraries or catalogs, publishers, and 30% with exclusive. Matt Vanderbo asks a great question. How long did it take you before you realized you could make this a full-time job? Not just as a dream, but in reality. That's a great question, and I can't wait to hear the answer from Dino. And Dean says most libraries register as cues, meaning registering them with the Copyright Office or with PROs, I'm guessing. Certainly with the PROs if they want to get paid. Waiting for the answer on Matt Vanderbo's. How long did it take you before you realized you could make this a full-time job? And Dean's answer is, I always felt I could do it. 4 to 5 years started to prove that I could do it. Fuller Music says, this is gold. You can't get this kind of information anywhere else like this. Thanks, Michael. You're welcome. You know what, though? The companies who copy us watch these shows, too, and then they take the information and put it out on their own blogs and their own videos. Hey, you know what? Spreading the love, but you heard it here first. Mojo Bone says there's a little bit in the book about how exclusive is likely the future, and he agrees. I tend to agree too, but for right now, I think finding a balance of some exclusive and some non-exclusive stuff is a great way to go. Matt Vanderbo says, thanks, Dean. Sounds like the old 5-year plan is just about right. Fuller Music says, imitation is the highest form of flattery. Yeah, but it still bothers me. It's like, come on, you guys, go out and learn this stuff. Well, they are learning it on their own. They're just learning it from us. We do the work. They take the credit. Dean says he still signs many non-exclusive deals. And Dean also says he treats his non-exclusive as exclusive. And what that means, if I may, is that if he puts something in a non-exclusive library, he doesn't take that same piece of music and put it in 4 other non-exclusive libraries. But I'm guessing that Dean is probably, if he creates a Redneck track, he may create 3 others using the template and take 3 tracks that are all somewhat similar and put them in different non-exclusive libraries. Thank you for that compliment, Adriana. Denali Highway asked, Dean, do you still approach people or do they pretty much mostly come to you? Dean says, I have too much work now, not really approaching new libraries. I hope that all you guys get in that position. But as Matt Hurt always says, he has remained a member, even though he's wildly successful all these years, has remained a taxi member and still goes to the road rally because it never hurts to meet new people, because libraries come and go. A lot of libraries are 2 or 3 person companies. They come and go. They fall in and out of favor. They have hot streaks, they have cold streaks. So, don't put all your eggs in one basket or 2 baskets. Look, Dean's got his stuff in 20 different libraries, 7 of which sound like they're active. Jazz Stan asked Dean, what lit the fire to make you write this book? All right, we are at the 1.5 hour, 90-minute mark, so I'm going to wrap this up. as soon as Dean answered this question, which is, I wrote it because I thought I had a lot of good info to share. And you know what? Last night I was sitting in bed thinking, what's my opening speech going to be for the road rally this year? And I was thinking about, in the past, remember like 3 or 4 years ago, my opening speech centered around the generosity of our community and our members. This year, at least the idea I came up with last night, I may get a better or different inspiration, but I think it's going to be integrity. I see a lot of integrity with our members and our community. So there you go. Dean, thank you so much for joining in. Thank you guys for showing up for today's show. Here is the book again, trying to do it in such a way that you can see everything. Demystifying the Cue by Mr. Dean Krippain. Awesome book, tons of great information. Again, you can find it at Amazon. Go there and search Demystifying the Cue or Dean's name. Dean, thank you for writing such a great book. So much of what you put in there, everything you put in there, just it needed to be said, and it needed to be put in a place where people can pull it out and look at it on a daily basis. I can't wait to see you at the Road Rally, my brother, and thank you guys. We will see you next week. Let me see. Do I have a guest already scheduled? I do. Next week will be none other than Bobby Borg on Taxi TV. So we will see you then. Thanks for tuning in today, and we will see you next Monday. Bye-bye, you guys. Thanks, Dean.